Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone to Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Bend. My name is Debbie Boone, and today my guest is Paul Camillo. Now, Paul, like me, is a CVPM, and for many years, he managed All Pets Dental with Dr. Jan Bellows, who we all are familiar with as the father of veterinary dentistry. He's been a CVPM since 2008. He has a degree in business administration. He has done multiple board advisory positions and was the past veterinary dental forums management and marketing track coordinator. Currently, he is the president of Your Pets Vets, which has opened 3 locations and has several more under construction. So basically, this tells me, Paul, that you are a glutton for punishment and you are opening and building hospitals simultaneously in different areas of the country. Or you have a really great network of support team members that can manage these hospitals and do all these construction projects. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we always like to get the origin story of our guests. So tell me how you got started in veterinary medicine.
Oh man, that's a great story. It actually started when I was still in college. I came home for school and I did what I loved to do back then, which was get on the couch and play video games, until my uncle came up to me one day and said, "Hey, you're not doing this all summer. Go out and find a job." So like many of us did back in the early 2000s, I opened up a newspaper, looked in the classified ads, and found a job as a kennel person. And I thought it was a great position because while in school, I was training dogs. And I thought it was a really nice way to meet new clients. Unbeknownst to me, I ended up working at Dr. Jan Bellows' practice, and within my first week of being there, we put braces on a Rottweiler. And as soon as we did that, I was hooked. I could not believe what I helped do, how close I was to the action. I realized, did a little bit of research and realized that they don't teach much dentistry in vet school. And I had the opportunity to learn from, one of the thought leaders in the profession and work by his side. So I actually stopped going to school. I didn't go back. I stayed working there on the job training, worked my way from kennel to tech assistant to tech to ultimately the head tech, that's where I really dove deep into dentistry and read all the textbooks I could and learned how to do all the procedures, and started teaching radiology and getting intimately involved in, all the side projects Dr. Bellows had going. And from there, at one point, I realized that what really float my boat was the growth part of it. And that's when I made a transition I went back to school, got my bachelor's in business, got my CVPM, and really went down the practice management and consulting route. And really since 2007 or so, actively out there lecturing, helping other animal hospitals grow through dentistry. initiatives range from growing through dentistry to increasing compliance to helping with communication, all very symbiotically related to each other. I had a lot of fun till the opportunity came where Dr. Bellows was selling his practice, and I saw it as a good opportunity to jump off and try to reinvent myself. And so here I am with York Pets Vets, trying to do something super cool.
Yeah. So really, Dr. Bellows' retirement, or I don't know if he's really retired, semi-retirement or practice sale.
He'll never retire.
Yeah, he won't. It's kind of the curveball, right? That life threw you, because then once Jan, you weren't working there, or there was a difference in ownership there. You felt that was the time to move out and to start your own thing with the hospitals that you're building now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Working with Dr. Bellows was such a great pleasure, and him and I did some amazing things together. And I just knew that I would never be satisfied with having a different set of either owner, if it was a single person or an entity or whatever. And I just knew that it was my time to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Jan is a really cool guy. I've known him for a long time. We did some work. You probably are familiar with the Greenies stuff that we did way back in the day. And that's, I think, how I met him the first time. And then we keep reconnecting in Fear Free and lots of other projects. And Jan's always got a lot of stuff going on. And every time I see him, I go, okay, how far did you run this morning? Because he's always out running 500 miles before we have any meeting. And then he shows up after all that looking like, he just came out of a bandbox with his tie and stuff on.
Yeah.
So Paul, I mean, what was your toughest challenge here? I mean, this is, I know you opened a hospital in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. The toughest challenge was how I approached it. I knew that because of my background and what I did for the previous 17 years, I knew we were going to be really good at compliance. I knew we were going to be able to create a high standard of care. I knew the service level was going to be ridiculous and clients were going to love it. I thought out all the technology pieces and workflows and all that. So I knew we were going to be very successful, a lot of different things. So what I ended up doing was identifying my biggest risk, which was creating enough teams and recruiting enough good people to scale at the pace we're scaling. And I decided to try to turn culture into my number one driver for the company. And from very early on, even with the mission statement of team first, amazing service, enhancing pets' lives, I always put the team first in the decision-making process. And there were a lot of, especially early on, I had no idea what that meant. There was about a 2-year break between leaving Jan's hospital and starting Your Pets Vets. And I read several books on team building. I have a lot of them still here in my library, but I really didn't know what that meant, to put your team first. Jan's hospital was an amazing place, many great clients, but we ran that based on the philosophy of the client's always right, which is a very kind of old school way of doing things. And many great businesses were built that way and very successful. And they're, it's just a different way of doing things. But when you start making decisions based on team first, you end up with different results. And that was probably the hardest part for me, is learning that on the fly.
Yeah. 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 I've always had the philosophy that the client is not always right, but the client's always the client. And you have to manage their expectations. And sometimes I don't think we're good at communicating. We don't do that very well in veterinary medicine, because we're animal people. And that's why we, you've seen the resumes. I don't like people. That's why I want to work in vet med. And then we find out it's a people business, big time people business. But, I like that what you're talking about here, because I think that when you are thinking about your team and their well-being primarily, then that's what makes your successful business, because your team builds your business.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they are the ones who drive the revenue. And I think a lot of times, if we don't understand that the first thing we have to do is take care of the people who take care of our business, then we won't have a successful business, or as successful as it possibly could be. Now you've just shared some incredible growth. Your first practice jumped from zero to skyrocketing in a year. You've just finished your first fiscal year with that hospital. So tell us a little bit about, how that happened in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, obviously, it's not a bad time, oddly, to open a hospital in a pandemic, because everybody's overwhelmed, right? And you probably picked up a lot of clients from people who couldn't get in other places because you were brand new, and they could get in, but you also have to keep them.
I thought it was going to be more challenging than it actually was. We were really prepared on it, mostly because the construction got delayed by around 6 months. So when I thought I was supposed to open, actually didn't happen for 6 months. For about 3 of those months, I already hired my office manager for the location. She was employee number one. So there were 3 months of her and I planning and building out the system and the infrastructure. I did a lot of, we have a comprehensive wellness plan here where they get annual vaccines, so they get a semi-annual visit with just diagnostics. And then I created a partnership with a local pet store that sends clients our way. So we have a really good pediatric wellness plan in place where they come in several times, ending with a pup 5 where they get diagnostic blood work. So we're very blessed that we get to train a lot of our clients on how to be excellent pet parents from the very beginning. And a lot of the people we're seeing are first-time pet owners. So we get to, I tell my team all the time, we are so blessed that we get to shape their pet owning experience. They don't know you do or don't do blood work annually. So let's just make it routine. Let's make it the norm. And we, on a daily basis, will run 5 to 10 wellness panels, going out to the lab just to screen pets for wellness care through wellness care. So the biggest decision was early on deciding, do we go curbside or not curbside? And I struggled with that a lot. And ultimately what we decided was not to go curbside, because I felt that it would affect our retention rate at a new hospital, being that these were all clients that are coming here for the first time. But we made masks extremely mandatory. And up till, the first 15 months of us being open, we only had 2 positive people on our team as separate instances. So we did really well protecting the team.
Yeah, you certainly did. And it just proves that it could still be done, and not doing it curbside. If you can figure it out, if you're creative in your processes, you absolutely can figure it out.
Recently, especially here in South Florida, certainly the new variants out there have been a little bit more contagious, and we've had more positives. So now we're doing a hybrid version of wellness, all our wellness stuff curbside, and any pets that are sick or new clients, we're allowing them in the building, 1 person per pet, and taking extra precautions to prevent the spread.
Yeah. So, looking back on this event, and I know that you were a really confident manager because you've been doing that for a long time, and speaker, and, well-versed in business, but still opening a business is scary, and investing a whole lot of money in it is scary. So what was the scariest part about looking at this, this plan that you had, and here's a 6 months delay in construction, and I'm sure you just kind of like seeing money bleed out the door while all this is happening? It's got to be frustrating and frightening.
Yeah, it was absolutely very frightening. I have been an employee for a very long time, and with that came a very nice salary with a whole bunch of benefits. And what I found out when you start your own business is you don't get paid until there's money. So there, from the very beginning, when we, not only with the delays on opening the first location, but really from the moment we opened, to me, there was a scramble to break even and a scramble to make our first dollar. And we were really successful. I mean, we were able to break even month 4 on a startup de novo hospital, which was fantastic. We broke 200. We broke 100 gram month 5, and then we broke 200 gram by month, and then we really haven't looked back. We've just grown, and closing our first fiscal year over $2 million is something I'm super proud of the team, and just the way they've embraced this culture of high level medicine, mixed with great service.
Yeah. Now how many doctors are there, Paul?
Yeah, so we have 2 full-time doctors, and then we have a couple of part-timers
Mhm.
that do more relief work, filling in here and there. My main medical director for this facility, she's on maternity leave now, so we've been kind of filling in while she's gone. But ultimately, this is a 2.5 doctors is
Mhm.
basically what we did that 2 million
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. That's for people who don't understand these numbers like we do. This is an incredible amount of revenue per veterinarian, because if you're looking at 600,000 as a tipping point to hire another one, but obviously you've leveraged the team highly here in this situation. Now, something else that you told me that I thought was really interesting is you advocate for pet insurance, and you have over 600 pets employed, covered and insured in this practice. And so allowing you to do this high level of care with affordability, that's an incredible story that I think people should listen to.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I'll tell you how I got to that. So when I resigned from Jan's practice, it was a very, very sad time in my life. I knew I had great things coming, but it was super, super sad to resign and to walk away, and to I had an overwhelming feeling that I was never going to be the best at anything again. It was a very scary thought, because everyone knows me for dentistry and dental marketing, and just being one of the rock stars in vet dentistry
Mhm.
out there. It's just a great career to kind of have that by my side and under my belt. But in starting Your Pets Vets, and when I resigned, I just felt like I was never going to be part of the best ever again.
Mhm.
And it was super, super sad. The planning stages of Your Pets Vets, when I knew we had to be, I was going to use all my same tools and tricks I did at my last practice, and I knew that pet insurance was going to be a very big part of what we're doing. And then it hit me. I looked at the model, I looked at the new clients, I looked at our conversion rate, and I said, wow, with a little bit of effort, and if we really homed in on this, we could be the very best at promoting pet insurance in the country. And we could start tracking metrics like new client to insured pet, where we range between 14 to 18% of our new clients end up insuring their pets.
Mhm.
And I just figured that it was a way that I could at least strive for being the best at something, and really motivate my team behind those thoughts, and drive, which in turn was going to drive them to push even harder to get these crazy insurance numbers that we're able to get.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love what you said about when you left working for Dr. Bellows and feeling like you were never going to be the best at anything again, because it's really true. I mean, you definitely have a reputation in the veterinary community as an expert on the technical side of dental care, and have certainly taught a lot of people out there the importance and how to market veterinary dentistry to the public. But interesting that leaving that is such an emotional thing. And it's, I think it is true. It was true for me when I left my first practice, I was the manager there for 19 years. It was an AHA accredited practice. It was very, bells and whistles. We had great compliance, and I'd even been speaking on compliance because our numbers were so good that pharmaceutical companies were asking me to come and share that information. Can you go teach other people that? But when you leave something that you're really, really good at and you go out into the unknown, it is terrifying. And then there's also that confidence. You got to get your confidence back, right? You got to say, really, can I go be as good at this other thing as I was in that? And the truth of the matter is probably yes, because once you have figured out how to be good at one thing, you can continue and take that pattern and continue to figure out how to be good at something else. And obviously you've done that same thing. So Paul, the decision-making process, let's talk a little bit about that, because here you are, really comfortable in your job, super well known, but yet you decide to say, it's not going to be the same without, me and Jan, the team, the A team there. I'm going to leave that. How did you decide to leave?
It was a long decision. It was a decision that probably took about 2 years, because we discussed selling the practice or not selling the practice for at least a year and a half. So it was once I knew we were selling the hospital is what really was the tipping point that said, all right. And we were always had great lines of communication. And at that point, I told Jan, I said, I certainly, for the numbers that practices are going for now, who would ever thought they would be worth what they are today? And it was a no-brainer that he should have sold the hospital for what it was valued. But at that point, I knew that it was just my time to move on, and call it a midlife crisis, call it, what you may, but it was certainly my time to push forward and try to create something really cool.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing Jan and him telling me that he had sold his practice and the multiple, and they were like, holy crap. So I get it. I get the fact that the numbers are just astronomical that veterinarians are being offered by these investments. And then I saw that you were, well, I think we probably spoke at a conference somewhere, and you told me about you starting your own practices. And I thought that was a really cool, but also an equally brave thing to do, because as someone who knows what it takes to do that, I certainly wouldn't want to be there. Somebody said to me one day, oh, Debbie, let's go open a bunch of veterinary hospitals and you can run them. And I went, no, I don't want to do that. I'll help you, but no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and maybe I should have been as smart as you are, because yes, it sounds a lot more grand than it actually is.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I have found myself over the last 2 to 3 months putting out an extraordinary amount of effort to get through some of the things we're having to go through. It's certainly a lot of work, and especially when the buck stops with me, it's much different. I always had Jan to lean back on and ask questions to, and get his guidance and opinion on what he would do here or do there or do that. And I still leverage a lot of my team members, the close ones, and ask those same questions and try to get the same guidance. But ultimately, I have to make that decision, and the buck stops with me. So it's a little bit different when it's coming from that perspective.
So I'm going to ask you this. Most people would have been satisfied with starting one hospital. Why such grand ambition to start so many?
That is a great question. Probably because I have a really good model, and the numbers and the things we're creating is just like super special and unique, that my investors are really fired up by the results and wanting to scale to probably much bigger than I would like to take it. But It's certainly some of that drive comes from the investors who are actually putting up the money and the dollars and trying to get a return
Mhm.
on their investment.
Yeah.
It's funny, I joke around. I have Dr. David Bellows, Jan's son, that works here, filling in for time to time. And when he's here, him and I just, it's like working with a brother. I love working with him. And we joke around, and I just look at him with puppy dog eyes and said, "Don't you miss the good old days when we used to share an office back
Uh-huh.
in the hometown?" And I said, when we used to just sit there and life was much more simple then. Yeah, I enjoy what I do, but it's certainly not exactly what I thought it'd be.
Yeah.
I thought once you become owner, founder, and president of a company that it would be much different. What I'm finding out now is that everyone doesn't work for me. I feel like I work for everyone.
Yeah.
And I am the main person out there trying to make sure my team is happy,
Mhm.
trying to make sure that everyone's content, trying to make sure they feel supported and they have the tools they need. And yeah, it's pretty interesting position.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more people that put those demands on you, the more difficult it becomes. And so, yeah, you're right. The buck stops here. And, I grew up, my family owned restaurants. And so I grew up as the boss's daughter.
Mm.
And I knew what it took to be that entrepreneur and how much it, because we had 6 restaurants and the largest one seated 1,000 people. So
Oh,
that takes a
wow.
lot of staff members and a lot of managers. And a lot of times our managers were some of the biggest headaches that we had, because they didn't perform appropriately, and it's really hard, and they're in different towns to monitor those things, as I think you just found out. So with some of the story you told me just before we started this. So looking back on your career, Paul, what do you think was your biggest career mistake?
Oh, that's such a good question. There's so many giant mistakes I've made. Oh, so many. Oh, the biggest mistake. I don't know if it's the biggest mistake, but it's one that really sticks out to me, and to this day just absolutely makes my skin crawl every time I think about it. It is one of my career nightmare situations.
Uh-huh.
About as the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was speaking at Western States one year. I check in. You know how it is when you get to these conferences. I just throw everything in the duffel bag and typically go to my room. I wasn't speaking that day. I don't even think I was scheduled to speak the following day. I, spent some time walking through the halls, sitting in the speaker ready room, and saying hi to all the usual suspects. And one that particular afternoon, I decided to go back to my room, which was in a separate hotel because my wife came with me and we wanted to stay somewhere different. So I went back to the room and I went to go take a nap. And as I'm napping, I get a phone call from a Vegas number, which I ignore. And then I get a phone call from not a Vegas number, a gentleman by David McCormick, who asked me where was I, and I said I'm in bed taking a nap, and he said you were supposed to start 5 minutes ago, and I just it's one of the, you could just imagine what I
Oh,
went through at that
oh,
moment of really just freaking out. I grab my clothes, I run to the elevator. I get dressed in the elevator. I run. I jump in a cab. They take me over to the Four Seasons. I get there, maybe 30 minutes into a 50-minute talk, and it's standing room only, a good 700 plus people. Poor David, is in the front of the room. Seemed like doing stand-up comedy, getting eggs thrown at him. Everyone was there to see Clients Gone Wild, and all they got was David, and it was just a nightmare
oh
scenario.
my gosh.
And how I ever got invited to ever do another speaking gig after that, I have no idea. But that is
Well,
when you say worst mistakes,
yeah.
that is certainly one that I regret.
Yeah. Well, a similar thing happened to me, except it actually wasn't on me, but I had been engaged to speak at the Florida conference. And as I flew into Fort Lauderdale, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but the airplane caught on fire in the Fort Lauderdale airport on the runway. And so my flight was delayed hours. And so finally I got over to the hotel, and this is in Boca Raton. And I get over to the hotel, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. I've had no food. I've got, airplane clothes on, and I try to find something to eat. Well, I look down at the speaker's schedule, and I'm not supposed to speak the next day. I'm supposed to speak the following day. And that first day is just continuing education for myself. And I looked down, and they've booked me at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I got in the conference coordinator. I went, I'm not even supposed to be here. Actually, I came in a day early so I could take a class. And I went, I don't know what you're going to do about this, but you need to figure out something, because I'm dragging. I mean, I can't possibly speak at 8 o'clock in the morning after the day I've had. And sure enough, I mean, they couldn't do anything. I think I ended up speaking still at 8 o'clock in the morning. They said, it's everywhere. And so I went, fine. But I mean, I'd had like no sleep. I was just a train wreck. I had no food. I mean, it was awful.
The show must go on.
I just happened to look at it, because that's not what I was in my contract. I was not supposed to speak that day, and they didn't change my contract. So it was just luck, pure dumb luck, that I was even there. I would have been in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had when that happened at WVC, what happened is they changed the schedule after my original schedule. Mm-hmm. And I never bothered when I check in to look at the new schedule. Mm-hmm. Or to look at the schedule. I just assumed whatever was in my original contract was what it was, and mm-hmm. It was different, and mm-hmm. and it obviously falls on my shoulders for not checking. But yeah, that was quite the day.
But you never missed another one, right?
Never missed another one. And they got the best 20 minutes out of me once I got going. I mean, they just I went through that PowerPoint, and it was the ones that hung around, which was most of them, certainly got the best bang for their buck.
That's a great story. So Paul, looking back at all this, and one of the things I think is interesting that I wanted to explore with you was you found investors in your idea. And I think there are a lot of potential entrepreneurs out there who would like to, or they have an idea and they'd like to find some financing with this. So how did you, and did your networking help you do this? How did you find investors to back your?
Sure. It was my network. Thankfully I've had a really good reputation of doing good work, and especially when I was linked up with Jan, and we had a uber profitable hospital there, and a lot of that was over the years of learning how to create great compliance around high level medicine. One of our clients there was an entrepreneur, in this discussing with Jan about selling the hospital and all that, I started putting out the feelers for potential entrepreneurs who might want to invest. And I guess the biggest advice I would give someone looking for investors is to have more than just a plan. Have a clear vision of how you're planning to accomplish your goals through your plan. And I think that's where I really stood out, because I could articulate every part of the business plan extremely well. How we were going to, it's one thing to say that we're going to have high standard of care. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't want a high standard of care?
Right.
But how do you accomplish that? Well, to do that, you have to have a clear plan for wellness. It starts with wellness, so that's where the annual and semi-annual visit come in. And then you have to have a very good compliance plan for when pets get sick and clients can't afford it.
Mhm.
So that's where, we brought in financing. We brought in, we have a couple of workflow things we do to help with compliance. But then what I think fired up my investors the most is when I really articulated to them what we were going to do with pet insurance, and how by accomplishing the things we're doing, we're going to be early adopters and really help shape vet medicine moving forward. Because once the word gets out on the type of revenue we're creating with insurance, and how now I would say, and I haven't looked at the numbers in a few months. I'm guessing I'm going to spend the next month parsing through those reports. But I would say that between insurance and third-party financing, that has to account for more than 35% of our revenue
Wow.
that we're generating here in the hospital. And a majority of that insurance money is straight payment to clinic. So the clients are able to come in and walk out without having to pay a majority of their bill. And I can't explain to you what that does to the culture at a practice. And I can't explain to you how proactive clients are coming in saying, hey, my dog kind of hiccuped the wrong way. What do you think? Can you please check them out? And they want us to bring their pets in and make sure they're healthy, because they understand that, hey, they have insurance. They don't have to worry about the bill. It's going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm just really proud of. And I think that was the tipping point. When I was able to explain that to my investors, they got really fired up about what we're doing.
Well, that direct pay to the hospital is a huge plus for compliance, because even if you have pet insurance and you've got a $3,000 bill, that still means at one point in time, you've got to come up with $3,000, even if you get, 2,700 of it back. So setting that up is really smart business. And I hope that more insurance companies wise up to that fact, because it's and you don't want to really be like a human health insurance model, because it's kind of a disaster. We don't want to get into that where they tell us how much we charge for stuff and you're stuck with that. But really taking the burden off the client to have to make immediate payment. And I mean, I've always believed it's our job to figure it out. Like, we've got to have the options in place for people. Not that we're a bank, because we're not a bank. That's not our job. But we do need to have tools in our tool belt to help people pay for care. And like you said, dividing up the visits was something that worked for me for many years in our practices. All of our patients were instructed to come twice a year for semi-annual visits. And we split up that big wellness visit into two, because it's easier to pay $250 twice than $500 once, or even $400 once for most people. So you've put two really important tools into place in your practices that I hope people listen to this podcast and take to heart, because we want animals to get care, and we want our practice teams to not spend all their time basically fighting clients about money, which is no fun. And it does put a detriment onto their mental health to have to constantly do that. Had there been other places in your career, Paul, where networking played a big role?
Yes, certainly. I think probably the best networking opportunity in my career has been when I joined Vet Partners. I joined Vet Partners, gosh, it must have been 2008. Instantly you get plugged in. I got plugged into all the thought leaders around consulting and people that published a lot and ran companies. And Vet Partners will by far is one of the better networking opportunities, at least for me, and that I have experienced in vet medicine.
Yeah.
That certainly helped I met great friends that way. I'm pretty sure that you and I met that way
Hmm.
at some point, or at least our first encounters were through vet partners, and it was always a good place to me, like-minded people who were always striving for excellence.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll have to agree with you. I think it's a great organization, and I wish more people knew about it, and more veterinarians took advantage of that list of great consultants on the Vet Partners Network, because this is a group of people who have an ethical code that they follow, and there are consequences for misrepresenting yourself if you are a member. And then you really do have truly some of the most brilliant minds in veterinary practice management, and in that group, the people who wrote the books are there. So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great
I
tool.
remember I remember studying because I think I might have joined Vet Partners right before I got my CVPM.
Mm,
So I remember reading Jim Wilson's book
yeah.
and studying for my CVPM. And then at the first Vet Partners meeting, here is Jim Wilson in the small little subgroup they created through whatever exercise we were going
Uh-huh.
through. And it was, I mean, I was just starstruck at that point,
Yeah.
at that meeting. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah. When I joined Vet Partners, you're supposed to give a little elevator speech, right, about what you do. Well, they forgot to tell me I was supposed to do that. And then I was put on like, but I just looked around that room and I said, you guys, thank you, because you are the people who taught me how to manage a veterinary hospital through your articles and your books and your writing and your lectures. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know what to do. You gave me the benchmarks. And so all I have to do is say thank you. And it's true. So you're actually standing in that room with all the people who just kind of make
Who
the
paved the
rules.
way?
Yeah,
Yeah, they paved the
absolutely
way.
did. Absolutely did. So, Paul, obviously, you've made a dramatic leap here out of the safety net of working in a practice that you had managed for a long time. And I know what that's like. But what advice would you give somebody who is facing this big life decision? Because, truthfully, one of the reasons that I started this podcast and vodcast is because I saw people struggling, workplaces where they weren't happy, but they stayed. They were just too afraid to make the move, or to decide to move, or there was too many circumstances in life that were causing them to have to stay. So I'm asking you, what advice would you give to someone who needs to make a move but is really concerned about the consequences of that?
The advice I would give someone is to think it through thoroughly, speak to your mentors, your family members, get advice. I contemplated the decision I made for a very long time before I made that decision, and make sure that you have a plan in place. When I was much younger, there was a time period of some time that I left Jan's practice just to do consulting work, and I was much younger and dumber then, wasn't married, no kids. I was, oh boy, those were the good old days.
A lot of
Um,
freedom.
and a lot of freedom.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't have a plan. I just kind of jumped into it and did it, and did pretty well before Jan made me an offer to come back. I couldn't refuse. Um, but I would say certainly speak to family members, certainly speak to your mentors, get advice from others. And if you're going to make a big leap and a big career change, make sure you have a plan. Make sure you have a thorough plan. When I jumped off to start Your Pets Vets, there were so many different things that I just didn't think through, that I kind of learned on the fly.
Mhm.
And although we've had a lot of success, uh, if I can go back, there would be many things I would have done a little bit differently and maybe tweak that success a little bit. So certainly come up with a good plan, and make sure that you're doing something that's going to at least bring fun. That's the saving grace, is that Although there's certainly a different level of stress and that's involved in my role, and because of the cool stuff we're doing, I mean, I absolutely love it. I could walk through, I sit in my lobbies and watch clients walk in the door, watch the greeting and the initial 5-minute interaction, and I just get goosebumps because when I started this, those 3 months I told you about that I was sitting with the manager, I told her I didn't want this to seem like an animal hospital. I wanted this place to work like an Apple store. So when clients walk in the door, I want them to feel like they're at an Apple store instead of an animal hospital. So we don't have computers here in the office. Everything is done through iPads. Everyone has a strap on them with an iPad hanging, so they could, just flip up their iPad and do whatever they need to do and flip it back down and be hands free. So it's just there's a lot of pride and a lot of fun in what I do, but there's certainly a different level of stress from when, just being the top of the food chain.
Well, hopefully after everything gets built and you get your good manager infrastructure, you'll be able to step back from some of that day-to-day stuff and have that delegated to the people who are working inside the buildings. And then you can just step back and enjoy it and do big picture strategy. My first boss, after I was there for a long time, I mean, he didn't do much of anything as far as the business part of the business. And it was more big picture stuff. And are we going to build a new hospital? That kind of stuff. And then right before he retired, he didn't even work in the practice. He moved to Florida for 6 months and he wasn't even there. So if you have a great manager and you get them trained up and you put them into place and you give them power, then as the owner, you get to go and do fun stuff, right? You get some freedom. And then same story for managers. If you delegate appropriately to your team, then you too have freedom, and everybody gets to do part of the burden, and it's not all on you. So
yeah, that was the thing at Jan's practice. I built a juggernaut over all those years. So the last few years working there was pretty smooth sailing for me. I had just a fantastic team around me. I had many leads. They were all experts at whatever they did. And it was smooth sailing. And starting a new business, especially, I kind of mentioned to you how I like to hire people with very little experience and kind of train them up. All my freedom was snatched away. Snatched away right away.
Yep, it was. I did the same thing. I mean, I've been managed that hospital for almost 20 years, and it really was a cakewalk. And then when I went into managing this 11 doctor mixed animal 24-hour-a-day practice, I thought, what did I do to myself? I really was walking this really easy, but then I realized I was kind of bored because it wasn't a challenge anymore, right? So that was the other thing. And people like you, people like me, we like the next big thing, and we like to push the envelope a little bit. So that was one of the things I did get to do managing that hospital. There was a lot, you have 11 doctor practice that's a walk-in practice. There's a lot going on in that practice to change. And so it was a challenge. It did exercise my mind. Let's put it that way. So you just look at it that way. Your mind is being exercised, Paul, and hopefully it'll level out.
Yes. Okay, that's a good way to look at it.
That's it. This is just like, this is weightlifting for your mind, and then soon you're just going to be bulked up, and it'll be good, right?
That's right.
Well, I don't want to take any more of your extremely valuable time, but I do want to ask you, do you have any final words of wisdom, any favorite books? You talked about some of the books on your shelves, and we always like to give some reading suggestions to listeners. Any favorite quotes, or even a person that you want to give a shout out to?
Well, let's see. I will give you my favorite book that helped me come up with the approach to building the teams the way we're building them. Probably this one here, the ideal team player.
Okay.
The ideal team player. That's where I got the philosophy of finding individuals that are hungry, humble, and smart. And really, once you find individuals like that, you could really, they mesh together extremely well. And they're always going to put the business needs first. So that would be the book I would recommend. As far as any shout outs, certainly to Dr. Bellows, who we probably should have invited him to this thing since we chatted about him so much.
We should. Well, maybe I'll
Yeah,
pin him down one day and get him on.
yeah, pin him down and get him on. Ask him a lot of questions about how did he let me go? How did you let Paul walk? And now he's over there crucified to his new practice and never being able to leave. No, it's great. I just saw him at the dental forum and we got to run 3 miles together, and it was, boy, the greatest 3 miles I ran all year for sure. So well, that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on. And I love the book advice, and what you said about, humble, smart, and hungry. What a great combination for superior staff members, and being meticulously picky. I know it seems so hard at this point in the game when there's so much need, we're so short-handed in veterinary medicine and people are leaving the profession. But if we realize that we would hire people like that, meticulously and carefully hire people like that, that they would stay with us and that they would grow in the profession, and that we would have exemplary teams that are happy in their work and they stay for long periods of time, just like you built in your practice with Jan and I built in my practice at Cobb. Some of those people are still working there, and I've been gone 15 years or more and they're still there. So when you build that core culture, people enjoy coming and they enjoy the work and they believe that they have great power to influence the business, as long as they're empowered. So you have to empower those folks. And I think you and I both have that same philosophy as, build great teams and step back and let them do their thing.
Yes. Empowering people is super important.
Mm-hmm.
No one likes to get micromanaged.
Yeah.
So that's why when we were talking earlier, and you mentioned Slack, which is a great tool. I kind of mentioned we use a different tool, but part of it is that I let my managers be the main voice for the hospitals, and I try to stay out of their way, and I coach them on the back end, and we have many conversations on what they should be working on and different approaches, but ultimately they're the ones that really get to manage their own teams without me chiming in most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Unless I used to tell people, it's okay to let people fail unless something's going to die or they're going to melt your bone drill.
Failing is great. Failing is great. I tell team members when I hire them, and I try to, when you hire someone, it's the best time to set expectations, right? Like that's going to be number one time. That way, when you set expectations right and you explain to them we're the very best at a few things and we want you to become an expert at these few things, and we're going to push you to become experts, and it's going to take doing webinars at night from home, and it's going to take you going to CE events, and it's going to take all the. If they're not into that and they're just looking to clock a check, then they just don't show up for their first shift, and you save everyone a lot of time. So part of what we tell them when we're hiring them, that, hey, we expect that you're going to make at least a dozen mistakes every day, because you're going to be learning a lot, and you're going to be doing things for the first time a lot. So it's okay to make mistakes. What we don't want you to do is be reclusive and not jump into the flow and want to help in fear of making mistakes. Make all the mistakes you want, as long as obviously we want to try to avoid hurting any patients. That's one. But most mistakes, it's a learning opportunity.
Mhm.
And as long as they use it as a learning opportunity and avoid repeat mistakes, that's the one you want to avoid. If you start making the same mistake over and over, that's where those are red flags. But
Right.
mistakes, they're going to happen. I still make mistakes almost every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I've done a lot of speaking in my life, and I've spoken to the VBMAs, the new students coming out, and I went, look, you're going to make a mistake. Something's going to die on your watch. It's okay. I mean, yeah, it's sad, but please understand that I want you to have a realistic expectation about that. And nobody's perfect. And I make mistakes. I've been doing it a really long time, but I try to only make it once. And then I don't make that, you learn from that and you go on and you don't do it again. But yeah, you're right. People who just continuously make the same mistake, you're like, something's really wrong here, or they're just not paying attention, or they just don't care.
yeah,
That's
they
the other
just
thing
don't care.
too, that they just
Well,
don't
it's
care.
the smart thing. Like,
Mhm.
so when I, read that book, and even before that, like, what was nice is that I kind of knew some of those things already,
Mhm.
and I practiced them from Jan's side. Years ago, boy, this is probably going back 8 to 10 years ago, Jan came to me and said, do you know that we have a technician that calculates drugs every day and gives injections every day that doesn't know what 6 times 7 is? And I said, that's impossible. Everyone knows what 6 times 7 is. You learn it in second or third grade,
Mhm.
and it's part of your times table. And everyone knows what 6 times 7 is. He goes, want to bet? Jen and I would always bet $1 on things almost every day. So I said, all right, you're on. We shake on $1. I go ask him, the individual that he mentioned. I said, hey, what's 6 times 7? And I got a blank stare back, and he guessed, I don't know what his guess was, 44, 41, whatever his guess was. I said, okay. So I went back to Jan's office. I took out $1. I gave it to him. He goes, now, do you want to bet double or nothing? I said, on what? He goes, go around the team, ask every team member 6 times 7, and let's do over unders on how many won't know it. Ultimately, there were two other team members that day that didn't know what 6 times 7 was. Both were either technicians. There were two techs and one assistant
Mhm.
that didn't know what 6 times 7 was. And not that they were bad people at
Mhm.
all, but when you don't have basic knowledge of your times table, then it raised the question, what else don't you know that should be part of your basic knowledge set to just live life?
Mhm.
And so part of all my interviews since back then, which I refine now with Your Pet's Vets, includes a math test with 6 questions, the first being what's 6 times 7. And about 20% of people get it wrong still.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd be
Wow.
surprised. 6 times 7, it's almost like there's a jinx on that question there,
Uh-huh.
because
Yeah.
20% of people get it wrong. And typically it just disqualifies them from, we cut the interview short at
Uh-huh.
that point.
Yeah.
Now everything else there, the other question is basically test if they know how to carry a one, if
Mhm.
they know long multiplication,
Mhm.
if they could if they could fill a prescription and know how to convert pounds into kilograms,
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
And if they don't get any of the other questions right, then so be it. We have calculators. I'm not trying to hire mathematicians, but if they don't get 6 times 7 right, then there's something there.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's interesting, really interesting. And I've never thought to go through and ask folks. And and honestly, I would say so many people now are so dependent on calculators. I would wonder if that basic learning thing that we did as children in school is no longer utilized or no longer exercised enough, to do that. Because one of the things I've always been able to do is percentages in my head. And I grew up in the restaurant business, and I can calculate a tip in a heartbeat. And that's how I learned how to calculate percentages, is just moving decimal points for me. But other people struggle with that. But it was an exercise that I did all the time. And I have slight dyslexia. So I struggle with things like clock faces and multiplication tables because of dyslexia. And I have to think about it, but I would get it right, but I couldn't do it like fast because my mind has to flip it, right? And flip the scenario. But very interesting questions. And I do think things like basic spelling and grammar are also things that we should have people write things, because they're writing in your medical charts. And we want to make sure that they actually can put together a coherent sentence, because this is something that's going to go in front of the medical board, possibly,
Potentially, yep.
Yeah, and hopefully never, but still possibly. And you want to make sure that they can actually spell simple words and write a sentence that makes sense out there in the world. So yeah, good, just basic information to gather from people on. But I think a lot of times and we're so anxious to have somebody who just comes and works for us that we'll go, yeah, I know your second cousin come, you're fine. And here we end up with you at our front desk taking care of our clients. You're like, oh boy.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Paul, you and I, we could talk about this stuff forever, because after what we've got to combine like 40 years of management between us. So we have probably lots of stories, horror stories and good stories too. But I don't want to take any more of your time and let you get back to your businesses and doing all that construction and keeping your monkeys going in your circus. How about that? Oh man. Well, and
lots of monkeys.
And I wish you Happy New Year to you and your family and your teams. And it's we're right there at the New Year. So hopefully 2022 will settle out a little bit and things will calm down. We just keep hoping for that, but we just keep moving on.
That's right. We could finally get out of this matrix we've been living in for 2 years.
So true. It's like Groundhog Day for sure.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate you being on this episode of The Bend. And we appreciate those of you who are listening. And we will give you Paul's information in the show notes so you can reach out and contact him, especially if you're looking for a job with a practice that has super great culture and puts team first.